Does the government spend too much money on higher education? With the serious workforce shortage across a wide array of industries, some experts are asking whether state and federal investment needs to better prioritize skill-based programs to better equip future workers.
The simple solution is that we need to expand our career-first education system to focus on other opportunities like apprenticeships.
On this episode, we dive into a new report that argues that we need to adopt a career-first mindset in education to equip workers to meet critical demand across a wide array of professions. This is Defending Ideas. Defending Ideas is a weekly podcast produced by Sutherland Institute. On this show, we are committed to renewing the principles of common sense conservatism, making you a better champion of sound ideas. Welcome back to another episode of Defending Ideas. I'm your host, Nic Dunn, and this week I'm very excited to be joined once again in our virtual studio by Josh Bandoch. He's the head of policy for the Illinois Policy Institute. Josh, welcome back to Defending Ideas.
Nick, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, when we last had you on, we talked a lot about opportunity and upward mobility. It's kind of what we're going to talk about today, but with a little bit different twist. You actually have a brand new policy paper from Illinois Policy Institute that just came out recently called Beyond Degrees, Empowering Illinoisans Through Career-First Education. You wrote it with your co-author, Lauren Zuar, there at IPI. So I want to talk to you about that because this has been an ongoing issue. Whenever we talk about economic opportunity and upward mobility, I mean, this has been the case for years now, in recent years, where one of the biggest constraints on the economy is a workforce shortage or a labor shortage across a wide variety of industries, which basically means that if you're a worker or a potential worker, it's kind of a worker's market. There's a lot of opportunities for you out there. But the big question that you, I think, tackle in your new paper that we want to talk about today is the system we have in various states across the nation designed to is it properly calibrated to help people actually take advantage of the opportunities that are out there? And so, Josh, I want to start out by asking you if you can kind of give us an overview of what you found in your research and kind of what you argue for. I read this as kind of a good faith critique, if you will, of what we've traditionally had as maybe sort of a degree first system. So let's start there. What do you see as kind of the status quo in our education and post-secondary education system, and how is it maybe limiting opportunity for some folks?
Great question, Nick. Thank you. And before I say anything, just a big shout out to my co-author, Lauren Zuar. She's been a delight to work with, and she's not here for the interview, but thank you, Lauren. So I think it's helpful just to pause and zoom out for a second. The American dream is all about the pursuit of happiness, and America is known as the land of opportunity. And that's about the ability of someone to step onto and climb up the economic and social ladder. So social mobility is foundational to the American dream. And at the heart of that is work. If you don't step onto the economic ladder through work, how can you climb it? And the sad reality is that you can't. So I think that America needs an education system that is centered on ensuring that as many students as possible are empowered to experience opportunity through work. And I think that unfortunately, our education system has shifted away from focusing on careers and focusing too much on degrees, specifically college degrees, that a bachelor's, graduate degree, some sort of advanced degree is a sign of success and is necessary to have a good job. And I think that's a problem that we need to go beyond degrees because the college system is not working for a lot of people. It's having a lot of people accumulate debt, and many people, even once they graduate college and accumulate lots of debt, aren't getting jobs. And that the simple solution is that we need to expand our career-first education system to focus on other opportunities like apprenticeships.
Josh, that's a great overview. Let me, I guess, kind of get into the details of it this way. I'll just share my own experience personally. I felt very blessed in my educational pathways. In my early part of my vocational journey, was able to get bachelor's degrees and then went on to get a master's in public policy and have just very, very much benefited from that. The sort of what we traditionally call the higher education system has been a big blessing in my life. It's been a great engine of opportunity and upward mobility for me personally. And I know there is a lot of data out there showing that, correlations with bachelor's degrees and then even master's degrees and PhDs and things with different levels of economic attainment. And so I want to start there with sort of this recognition that there are obviously a lot of people who derive tremendous benefit from degrees and the opportunities that can come from that. But it sounds like you're saying that's great, that we're not trying to take away from that. But does there need to be a recognition nationally that isn't always how it shakes out for everyone?
100%. So college is one great pathway. Do you want the engineers building our bridges to not have a college degree in engineering? Probably not. Like, this is really important. And if you need college, the skills you learn in the social sciences or the humanities or in the STEM fields for your career, absolutely. And America has a wonderful university and college system from which you and I and many of the listeners have profited. And it's an amazing thing. And I think we've come to think not that college is one great pathway, but that it is obviously the best pathway. And I think we even see this in the name, higher education. And it makes me wonder, well, higher than what exactly? There's nothing inherently better or worse about earning a degree in history or political science or math than working in the trades, whether it's construction, which is a great way to have a career, or maybe in some of the newer fields that you can earn an apprenticeship in, like in technology. So I want us to see college as one pathway and to be more open to other pathways. And one reason for that is that, as it turns out, folks that complete an apprenticeship, they earn an average of $80,000 a year. And folks that do not complete an apprenticeship, meaning that not that they started and didn't finish, but just anybody who did not complete an apprenticeship, their average salary is $55,000 a year. So if the goal is to have a higher education in terms of salary, then it's really important to recognize that entering the trades and completing an apprenticeship is a great way to earn a great salary to support an individual and his or her family.
Josh, I like the sort of broadening of the scope of, and also shifting the ultimate goal. And in your paper, we talk a lot about this idea of a career-first education system. It kind of seems to me like we're just sort of lengthening out the target, that it's not just sort of the moment where you get a diploma, if we're looking at the traditional kind of four-year pathway, but it's getting a job and getting into a career that creates value for society, creates value in your own life, and allows you to provide for yourself and a family, and where you can derive a lot of meaning from that. And so one, I guess, is it kind of just saying, well, we need to lengthen out what our scope of focus is. And that's why you kind of talk about this career-first mindset. I'm reminded of, one of the big political debates we've had in this country in recent years during the Biden administration, when they were looking at student loan forgiveness. And we'll set aside sort of the constitutional debates. We've talked about some of those kinds of things on this show in past episodes. But I remember there was a lot of commentary about, what kind of value are we placing as a society on, again, sort of a bachelor's degree or a master's degree compared to somebody working in plumbing or other skilled trades, or electrician or sheet working, or other, a wide variety of careers that are needed and good paths in our society, but don't get kind of the same societal attention, if you will. So I give all that context to say, how in your mind would a career-first mindset fix that?
Great question. So I think maybe it's a lengthening, but also expanding, and I think breaking down some of the mindsets that we've developed that are a little bit unhelpful. So I mentioned the mindset that college is best, and I think college is just one great pathway. So I think it's not only a lengthening, but an expansion, because we need to see more fields as great fields and respectable fields. So it's not just that this is an okay path, but that it is highly respectable to enter any number of trades. Again, whether it's construction, plumbing, or IT, or finance, or lots of fields that you can do an apprenticeship. So I do think it's not even necessarily an expansion, but a return to a lot of the things that we thought 50 plus years ago. Because this new mindset is, it's a new mindset. So it is shifting over to that and recognizing that whatever your educational pathway is, whether you go through high school and then in high school complete an apprenticeship, whether you enter a trade school after high school, whether you go to college, that the goal of all that education is to make sure that you can get a job, and ideally that you can get a career. And that's one of the beautiful things about the trades and apprenticeships, is that you're actually training for a career. If you earn a bachelor's in history or English or political science over here would be mine, it's not entirely clear what you're going to do with it. And I'm not even sure that colleges and universities do a great job of advising students, okay, you have your sociology degree, what's next? When you do an apprenticeship, it's clear what's next. You are on the first rung of that ladder to become a fully active and licensed professional in that field. Certified, rather.
Let's talk about some of those details, because you mentioned apprenticeships just now, and that features very strongly in your paper. There's a stat that you share in your paper. It's focusing on the state of Illinois, obviously where you guys are based, but the report mentions that there are 324,000 open jobs in Illinois. I think this is of November 2024 data. So 324,000 open jobs in Illinois with 283,000 job seekers. So just looking at those numbers, there's a serious gap between the number of jobs open and the number of job seekers looking for work. I guess why do you think there's such a big mismatch?
Yeah, so this skills gap is a huge problem, because if all the people who were looking for work could fill those jobs, just think of all the great things that would do for the individuals, for the businesses, for the economy, and they can't. And I think that gap is there largely because employees or prospective employees don't have the skills that prospective employers need. And that from a policy standpoint, and certainly our elected officials need to consider where demand is for jobs today and where demand is going to be for jobs tomorrow, to think about the future of work and ensure that our comprehensive education system, whether it's through colleges and universities, or whether it's through completing an apprenticeship or some other workforce development program, that those training programs are going to meet the needs of employers. So that gap is there because it's not doing that.
Let's talk about apprenticeships a little bit more, because one of the things that we're working on here in Utah is tying into the construction industry in particular. That there's obviously a strong recognition here in the state that housing is one of our most pressing issues. In fact, Utah Governor Spencer Cox said in one of his, I think it was one of his State of the State addresses, but within the last year or so, that housing is his first, second, and third priority, to kind of just emphasize how important that is for him and for the state as a whole, because there's a serious lack of adequate housing supply in Utah. And I know this doesn't only affect Utah, but that leads to putting upward pressure on the prices of homes. And so that ties into a lot of the stuff you and I talk about, upward mobility and just the ability to afford to provide for your family. But I give all that context because one of the things we're getting into is this question of, what does the construction workforce shortage look like in Utah, and how does it interact with our ability to sort of deliver on the construction projects we need in the state, which obviously include housing. And so as part of that, I've been doing some outreach to some of the construction firms here in Utah, and have kind of been talking to them about their experiences, and also looking at some of the national data. And some of the national data shows that when construction firms, at least on the national level, do get applicants, often they see those applicants as not having the skills necessary to do the work, to do the job. So I give all that to kind of funnel back to, because you talk about apprenticeships so much, can you talk for a minute about how you see apprenticeships being a tool to, number one, help address workforce shortages broadly, and number two, can it be a tool specifically in construction and the skilled trades?
The short answer to that question is yes. It can absolutely be a tool in the trades and in construction in particular. Maybe let me start by just highlighting how lucrative it can be to work in construction. So in Illinois, the median annual wage for 3 construction fields it's huge. So elevator construction, over $129,000. Drywall finishers, over $103,000. And structural steel workers, over $98,000. I don't think people have any sense even how lucrative those trades can be. So what is stopping people from having the skills? Part of it is just knowing that they can make a really great living for their families doing those trades. And then knowing that there are opportunities. So apprenticeships are such a great way to train because apprenticeships are not internships. Apprenticeships are paid training programs. And I think that's one of the things people don't realize. As an apprentice, you are earning a salary. It's typically somewhere around 50% of the full starting wage. And then as you gain skills, both technical skills and then soft skills, because they are increasingly important in our modern economy, as you gain those skills and you become a more valuable employee, then they pay you more. So this is generally a 2 or 3 year process, sometimes shorter, where you're acquiring those specific skills. This can happen through a registered apprenticeship program that's administered through the Department of Labor. There are other ways you can have private apprenticeships or industry recognized apprenticeships, but all these programs are generally speaking highly effective at getting people the skills that they need and allowing people to enter careers where they can earn a lot of money for their families. And my sense is that the trades, construction, and a wide range of other trades know that we need way more apprentices and way more people working in these fields.
Josh, I want to high center for just a minute on something that I wrote down as kind of the awareness gap. That you said that one of the biggest barriers, in your view, to folks not pursuing apprenticeships or related opportunities in construction and skilled trades is just this lack of awareness of how lucrative they can be, how much money they can earn. And some of my conversations with local construction firms here in Utah, that there at times I think is a perception that you walk around high schools, and if you were to observe, there's so much attention and focus on what's next being a traditional 4-year degree pathway in some form or another, and not enough on there's actually a lot of other cool opportunities as well, and you can make a lot of money going these other pathways. So can you talk for a minute about how we should be thinking about the awareness gap of apprenticeships and opportunities in construction and trades, and then also does that branch out into other professions as well?
Nick, that's excellent because this starts at least in high school and often way younger. So it starts in high school. They typically have at high schools a college counselor. They less often have a career counselor, somebody who would really help a student understand, what do you like doing? Do you like working with your hands? Do you want to read books? Like, what do you enjoy doing? And if those conversations were about that, then we would start to see apprenticeships as an equally valid choice for students, but they're not even aware of it. If you go into a high school and you ask students, you want to make $129,000? They'd say, yeah, great. Doing what? And there is no world in which really any of them would know that you can do that in construction. And there's a list in the report of lots of other lucrative industries where you can make a lot of money as an apprenticeship. Nobody knows that. And in fact, high schools are generally measured and they celebrate to parents what percentage of their students go to college. So if you go to a school and it's like a private school especially, and you're considering sending your kid there, and you see that only 52% of students go to college, the intuitive response is, what's wrong there? And that's not the right question. I do think that parents bear some responsibility too if they don't socialize from an early age, that it is totally fine if you go to college or you enter a trade or you enter the armed forces or whatever. These are all great career choices. And I think from way on high, typically speaking, we demean those choices. I was back in academia, I remember attending a workshop from a professor at MIT, and he was talking about jobs that no one ought to have to do. Basically things like working in the trades, that of course he, being in higher education, was doing something far better than those folks that fix his toilet when it clogs and fix his electricity when he doesn't have lights and build his home and probably build his second home and all those sorts of things that, sure, he can employ those people, but what he does is far superior.
Josh, one of the things that stands out to me is it seems clear from this conversation and from your excellent report and from some of the other data we're seeing across the nation that it just seems evidently clear that we need more apprenticeships that can put people on pathways into construction and trade jobs in a variety of ways. But I'm also thinking, and you address this in your paper, why couldn't we expand the apprenticeship model to every career field? I mean, you think of any field at all where there's a workforce shortage, or any field that can be an engine of upward mobility for folks who are trying to escape poverty, which is something that you and I have talked about before, we care about a lot. Why couldn't we sort of replicate the success of apprenticeships? Yes, upscale it in construction and trades where we have a shortage, but then duplicate it across every industry sector. Is there anything holding us back? Why couldn't we as a country, as states, do that?
Totally. And I think there are two ways to think about this. The first is an awareness of other fields that actually are apprenticeable that we don't think about. And I'll just highlight a couple of those. So and all these data are for Illinois, and that's going to be pretty representative of other states. So you can apprentice to become a bank branch manager. And that median salary is almost $150,000 a year. In technology, you can apprentice become an application developer, $126,000 a year, or a cybersecurity support tech, $116,000 a year. You can apprentice in healthcare. You can become a registered nurse or a lab tech or a behavioral health aide. You can apprentice in a wide range of other professions, and we don't realize that. What's even more important than that is you can apprentice to get into an industry and then climb the ladder. So even if you're entering into the IT or the finance space, your first rung is an apprenticeship, and then you can prove yourself and then climb to places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. I also think it's important to identify industries where we don't have apprenticeships and think about how we can expand them. The most ripe area for that is in fields that require an occupational license. So I'll hold up cosmetology as like the emblematic example here. In Illinois, you need 1,500 hours of training at a licensed school to earn your cosmetology occupational license, which is just a government permission slip to do a job. And that costs $18,000. So you're paying $18,000 and not working for at least 9 months, which means that you're not earning $20 or $30 or $40,000 in that time. So there's a tremendous cost to that. What's the alternative? Well, we could also open up a pathway to do those 1,500 hours by becoming an apprentice and working at the local barbershop on Saturdays and or in the evenings, work at a local hair salon, learn to cut. And in 2 to 3 years, you would fulfill all of the hours requirements, depending on how many hours you did per week, to earn a license instead of having to stop working for 9 months and pay $18,000.
Josh, I want to talk about this is all incredibly compelling to me. And again, it sort of folds into this idea of what you said at the outset, that our goal as a state and a nation should be to have an education and training system that provides opportunities for the highest number of young people possible to get good jobs, earn good wages, provide for themselves and their families, essentially live the American dream. And there needs to be some correction or reform or improvement on the existing system to help us achieve that broad goal. So I love that aspirational framing. And so it's very compelling to me. I guess the question on my mind now is, well, how do we do this? How do we actually start taking the steps to build upon the good things that have already happened in this area, and again, kind of take things to the next level. So I want to ask you how we do it, and then also talk about, if we have time before we close, what some of the benefits could be to help people see that vision. And to get into the how, I want to read a brief section of your report, because you actually argue for looking at ways we can reappropriate funds from sort of the traditional higher ed system in some way to apprenticeships, or kind of more this career first, skills based learning model. And so from your report, you say that Illinois allocates $2.6 billion to higher education, which is over 90 times the amount it invested in secondary school, career, and technical education in 2024. So again, 90 times more investment going to what we would call higher education versus the career and technical side. Walk us through kind of what you would suggest is where to start, how to be thinking about using the resources states already are investing in education and training to help this broad aspirational goal become more realized.
Yeah, so this is going to seem initially really controversial. So I'll unpack it and it'll probably seem really controversial. One of our big recommendations is to shift funding from quote unquote higher education, colleges and universities, over to support workforce development programming, particularly apprenticeships, including secondary school apprenticeships. So we would like this to be budget neutral because at least in a state like Illinois, where the budget has increased about 50% in the last 8 years, and it's a state that already has a lot of fiscal problems, we don't think it's a sensible recommendation to simply spend more money. What's more, both as a former academic anecdotally and also based on our research, we do think that there's a lot of bloat in colleges and universities. So just in the fiscal year 2024 alone, Illinois spent about $428 million on administrative expenses. And this included over 2,000 public university administrators whose base salary was at least $100,000. So that's a lot of money on a lot of really expensive administrators. So the first place we would look to trim is in administration. We don't want to cut the crucial programs, the instructors, things like that. But for universities to honestly assess, with all this money, are we doing the right things with it? And in my time universities, I've seen things like luxury dining halls and rock climbing walls. You can look for lots of other wild stories about lazy rivers at universities. So the thought that universities can't be a little more economical with resources, in my experience, is not borne out.
So if we start having those conversations about, again, maybe at a given state level, looking at all the funding we're allocating to, and I would just say the system, to be very broad, to say traditional four-year universities, community colleges, trade and tech schools, certificate programs, apprenticeships, kind of everything under the sun, and kind of taking that aggregate analysis, that 30,000-foot level, and say, okay, well, are we putting resources in the right places where it needs to be? And I think a lot of those conversations, at least here in Utah, are happening. I'm sure can continue and can build on that momentum and improve on this idea. But can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the benefits as well? And here's one particular angle that's on my mind for that. We recently had on the show Nic Eberstadt, who wrote the book Men Without Work. Fascinating discussion about, in recent years and decades, the serious decline of the labor force participation rate among men, working age men. That's a fancy way of saying there are millions of prime age, like workable men out there who are just not engaging in the economy anymore. And what Nic Eberstadt shows in his data is it's not that they are transitioning to other sort of what we would think of as socially productive activities. They're just sort of disengaging in various ways. And so that's one thing that we've started to talk a lot about on this show, of sort of this idea of the well-being of men and boys. We've had Richard Reeves on in the past talk about his book of Men and Boys. And so I'm thinking back to our initial conversation around construction and skilled trades. Construction typically has been male-dominated as an industry, especially in sort of the craft labor positions. It's the last data I saw is at least 90% men. And so I'm kind of trying to weave that in to see that if we can expand apprenticeships, yes, in construction and trades, but also in a wide variety of fields, what do you see as the broad-based benefits of that? And could apprenticeships be a tool to help get some of the working age men who are on the sidelines re-engaged in the economy in a constructive way?
Yes. And I think that you have pressed on what is actually the most important labor statistic that we have. So we can just walk out for a second here. The labor force participation rate, that measures people who are either in the workforce working or people who are unemployed and looking for work. If somebody drops out of the labor force and is no longer looking for work, then they're not counted as unemployed. And nationally, since about 25 years ago, when the LFPR for short peaked, we've seen a huge decline in the number of Americans in general who demographically 25 years ago were working and who are no longer working today. And as you rightly point out, Nic Eberstadt's phenomenal book, Men Without Work, highlights that this problem is particularly pronounced among working age men. exactly the people that we would expect to be working, that their labor force participation rate is down something like 8 or 9 percentage points. I don't know what the exact data are today. That translates to, like, I think it's over 3 million men. It's certainly millions of men who demographically a generation or 2 generations ago were working and today aren't, even though they're generally speaking able to do so. So this has enormous social and economic consequences. I do think that at least one reason for it is that these men probably don't have a clear sense of either what they should do with themselves, or if they leave the labor force and want to re-enter it, they don't have the skills they need to re-enter it successfully. And that's why this career first approach is so important, so that whether it's in high school or right after high school, everybody is pointed towards a career, and they have those skills that allow them to re-enter things. Say if you're a bricklayer and you fall on hard times for a couple of years, you still know how to lay bricks, and you've learned that, and then you can re-enter the construction trade a lot more easily. And so whether it's entering the workforce or re-entering it, you're equipped in a way that I think we're generally not equipping people today.
Josh, we've got just a couple minutes left. And before I ask my last question or so, I just want to point out that the report is excellent. We'll include the link in the show notes. Encourage everyone to go download and read the report. Props to you and Lauren, your co-author, for giving this analysis. That, again, even though you focus on Illinois predominantly, I mean, these are a lot of the same conversations we're having in Utah that I've seen had at the national level. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has done a ton of work on the workforce shortage. And so this sort of career-first mindset, I think, is really impactful and really compelling for how we should be thinking about it. As we wrap up, we've just got just a couple minutes left, so kind of a two-part final question, if you will. And feel free to weave in anything else if there's anything we missed that you want to make sure you touch on. But the two-part question, I always like asking sort of the elevator question, that if you're standing there and on an elevator and in walks the president and congressional leadership, and they say, hey, you're Josh Bandoch, your report was great. What should we do? What's the first step on the federal level to advance more of a career-first mindset? And then connected to that is the governor of Utah and legislative leadership. They ask you the same question, and sort of the lens I'll apply to that is, here in Utah, we have a number of high-quality, four-year universities that are a huge anchor to our community. We also have community colleges. We also have trade and tech schools. So there's a broad ecosystem here in Utah. So how do you answer that question to those leaders saying, career first is compelling, what should we do to advance it? How do you answer that in a way that, frankly, for me, doesn't come across as just like you're bashing college? It's a yes and. What would be your response to that?
And just to be totally clear, it is a yes and. That career first is a yes and. College is great, and there are other great pathways to a career. So the goal with this is not at all to bash college. If I got to talk to the president, maybe Speaker Johnson is sitting here, he's standing next to him in the elevator, I would say, Mr. President, first and foremost, use your bully pulpit to celebrate apprenticeships and other career pathways besides college, because we need to hear from on high in the political hierarchy, from the very top, that this is a great pathway into prosperity, especially out of poverty, and certainly into opportunity. That this is a great pathway for all Americans, that it is a great way for more people to live their version of the American dream. So that's the first thing. Then I would say, Mr. President, it would be great if you could talk to your labor secretary and you could open up more pathways to apprenticeships. So in the previous Trump administration, they had looked into getting something called industry recognized apprenticeship programs going, IRAPs. And that was, kind of shut down post first administration. I would say, let's try to reopen that. Let's see if that's another pathway beyond registered apprenticeships through the DOL, that more folks and more industries can offer apprenticeships. And I would say, Speaker Johnson, while I have your ear and you're helping craft legislation, let's see where we can shift some funding over. Perhaps it's from colleges, universities. That's my go-to right now, is let's just stay with it. Where can we find funding while keeping it budget neutral to do two things? One is to support more apprenticeship and other workforce development programs. And then second, to make sure that they work, so that just like with anything else, that these are effective programs. Maybe pilot some programs, test them out in certain states or in certain capacities, but let's shift some more money here because we know this is a great pathway. And then next day when I fly home, turns out that sitting next to me is Governor Pritzker. What would I say to Governor Pritzker or any governor? I would say, Governor, you have a unique opportunity in your state to go to the mat for opportunity, because that's what a career first education system is all about. Go to the mat for opportunity. It's great for the economy. It's great for individuals. It's great for businesses. It's great for families. Go to the mat for this. Expand these opportunities. That's going to be the best thing you can possibly do. And something maybe I should have started with, and it's not a bad place to end, is that the happy reality is that apprenticeships at this point are one of those truly bipartisan things. So whether you're talking to a President Trump or President Biden, whether you're talking to a Governor Pritzker or the previous governor, Governor Rauner, apprenticeships are something that have widespread support. This is not one of those, sharp partisan recommendations. There's widespread recognition. In fact, one of the places that I've really looked to for great research on apprenticeships is the Progressive Policy Institute. They've done excellent research on this. So really across the political spectrum, folks recognize that this is a great pathway to opportunity. So this isn't even something that requires tremendous political capital. One of those really dicey things that I don't know, if I do this, I'm kind of done for a while. This is really like just, what do they call a win-win scenario.
Well, Josh, we'll have to leave it there. This has been excellent. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your time and expertise and helping us advance some of these important ideas in Utah and around the country as the work you've done in Illinois is kind of helping to advance those ideas that can create more opportunity and upward mobility. And again, I like this career first mindset that you kind of bring it all back to. So thank you again for your time. Again, folks, the report is Beyond Degrees, Empowering Illinoisans Through Career First Education, with our good friend Josh Bandoch, head of policy at Illinois Policy Institute, and of course his co-author Lauren Zuar. Josh, thank you again for being with us on Defending Ideas.
Nick, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to leave you all with a quick break before we leave you with some talking points, so don't go anywhere. This is Defending Ideas. We'll be right back.
Sometimes it's hard to keep up with the latest policy debate that affects your life. The solution? Subscribe to Sutherland Institute's weekly newsletter, where you'll find in-depth insights from seasoned policy experts, compelling multimedia, and advance notice of special events. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back. I really like the aspirational principle that Josh outlined in our discussion, really that the entirety of our education and training system should strive to equip as many young people as possible with the skills they need to have a good career. So here are some key messages you and I can use to move toward that goal. First, college can be a great pathway to opportunity and upward mobility for a lot of people. Higher education has certainly blessed my life in really profound ways, but it's not the only path. And in fact, for many, there could actually be better pathways out there that are equally dignified ways to contribute and make a living. We need a cultural reset that values all pathways that can provide good options. Second, apprenticeships are an underutilized tool. We certainly need to expand these kinds of programs in construction and skilled trades to help address workforce shortages in those critical industries. But the model can also be applied to a wide array of professions that you normally wouldn't probably associate with apprenticeships. And third, expanding our view of education and training programs in this way will also unleash more pathways out of poverty and into the middle class, making the American dream within reach for more of our fellow Americans. And ultimately, that should be the goal of our education system. Well, that's it for this episode of Defending Ideas. If you enjoyed this discussion, please visit defendingideas.org, where you can access previous episodes and watch or listen on your favorite platform. Make sure to subscribe to Defending Ideas on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you like to get your shows. And please share this episode on your own social media profiles or with a friend, family member, or coworker who might find it interesting. Lastly, if you want to support the broad work of Sutherland Institute, and if you want more conversations like this, please make a contribution at sutherlandinstitute.org/donate. Thanks again for joining us on Defending Ideas from the Sutherland Institute in Salt Lake City. I'm Nic Dunn. We'll see you next time.